Now you can go ahead, Prabhu.
Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Mr. Pad Paramahamsa Paravajikacharya Ashtotar to Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paravajikacharya Ashtotar to Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, we're on page 258. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 12th day of March 2024 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 6, Dhyāna-yoga, text number 2 on page 258. Yam sannyasam iti prahu yogam tam vidhi pandava na hi asanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kashjana yang sanyasamati prahu yogam tam vidhi pandava na hi asanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kashjana yang sanyasamati prahu yogam tam vidhi pandava na yasanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kashjana yang sanyasamati prahu yogam tam vidhi pandava na yasanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kashjana yang sanyasamati prahu yogam tam vidhi pandava na yasanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kashjana. Anyone online?
Jam sannasam iti prahu
Yang sanyasamati prahu
yogam tam vidhi pandava
yogam tam vidhi pandava
nahi asannasta sankalpo
na yasanyasta sankalpo
yogi bhavati kashana.
yogi bhavati kashjana. Word by words. Yam, what? Sannyasam, renunciation. Iti, thus. Prahu, they say. Yogam, linking with the Supreme. Tam, that. Vidhi, you must know. Pandava, O son of Pandu. Na, never. He, certainly. Asanyasta, without giving up. Sankalpaha, desire for self-satisfaction. Yogi, a mystic transcendentalist. Bhavati becomes kashjana, anyone. So, text 2, page 258. Translation. What is called renunciation you should know to be the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme, O son of Pandu. For one can never become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. Purport. Real sannyas yoga, or bhakti, means that one should know his constitutional position as the living entity and act accordingly. The living entity has no separate independent identity. He is the marginal energy of the Supreme. When he is entrapped by material energy, he is conditioned. And when he is Krishna conscious or aware of the spiritual energy, then he is in his real and natural state of life. Therefore, when one is in complete knowledge, one ceases all material sense gratification or renounces all kinds of sense gratificatory activities. This is practiced by the yogis who restrain the senses from material attachment. But a person in Krishna consciousness has no opportunity to engage his senses in anything which is not for the purpose of Krishna. Therefore, a Krishna conscious person is simultaneously a sannyasi and a yogi. The purpose of knowledge and of restraining the senses, as prescribed in the jnana and yoga processes, is automatically served in Krishna consciousness. If one is unable to give up the activities of his selfish nature, then jnana and yoga are of no avail. The real aim is for a living entity to give up all selfish satisfaction and to be prepared to satisfy the Supreme. A Krishna conscious person has no desire for any kind of self-enjoyment. he is always engaged for the enjoyment of the Supreme. One who has no information of the Supreme must therefore be engaged in self-satisfaction, because no one can stand on the platform of inactivity. All purposes are perfectly served by the practice of Krishna consciousness. Om jnana timarandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshur unmilitam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, Krishna is going to speak about sannyas and, of course, yoga. This is called Dhyāna-yoga chapter, and it's the classic eightfold system called Ashtanga. Ashta is 8, Anga is limbs. So the classic yoga system that is outlined and described in detail by Patanjali. Patanjali Muni wrote the book on Ashtanga yoga. And what are those 8? Well, the first one is yama and then niyama. Yama are the don'ts, niyama are the do's. In any process, even if it's any material process or any, you want to become a doctor, you want to become a lawyer, you want to become a champion Olympic swimmer, there's a system to train the body and the mind in a certain way to achieve your goal. And invariably, you have to go to a teacher. There's often a book involved, which is another form of a teacher. And what do they teach you? What to do and what not to do. Same thing with medicine. If you have some disease, you go to the doctor, he says, okay, do this, take this pill, and don't eat this. And don't stay up late. In other words, there's don'ts and there's do's. Anything. Anytime you want to go from here to there, it's a marg. Just like it's a bhakti marga, it's a path. And that path involves accepting things that you need to do and giving up things that you may want to do but you can't do if you want to achieve your goal. So in the yoga system, it starts with the yama, which is similar to our 4 regs. I'm not sure what formally it would be, but it's like that. It's controlling this, don't do this, don't do this. And then niyama, which is the do's. And that involves, so many things. Some of them are in the list. Pranayama, you have to sit and control the breathing, which helps control the mind, and also keeps the body healthy. Asana. Now, asana, it's traditionally means sitting in lotus posture, But there's also all these other asanas. If you go to a Hatha yoga studio, you'll find, we're going to do this asana, this Shirshasana, standing on your head. Shirsha means head, There's a whole series of them. I used to do some of that. So that's kind of a takeoff on it. And Prabhupada experienced that when he came to America. He, as you may know the history, he first went to Butler, Pennsylvania. He had that connection. That's why he could come. Because a pious gentleman in India had I think when his son was living in Pennsylvania, he had migrated to become some professional, I forget what it was. And so having that, then when that man in India met a preacher or a sadhu who wanted to go to the West, or maybe mentioned that to him that, I'll write my son, and if you go there, you can stay with him for some time. In other words, it's a way to get acclimated. So he had so many sadhus that he had sponsored, and his son would always say, yes, because he had to sign that in order to be able to get the visa to come to America. But none of them ever came. None of them actually took the trouble, because it's a big, haul to come over to America and everything. And also the cost of the transportation, which is a lot. But Prabhupada got a free passage, but it was on a cargo ship. It wasn't very commodious. Yeah.
How did he get to Pennsylvania from New York or wherever he went?
I'll explain. Yeah. So this gentleman, Prabhupada expressed his desire to go to America, and this gentleman, heard about it. He said, I have a son in Pennsylvania who can sponsor you. When you go, you can stay with him. He said, that's good, because Prabhupada, he had no place to stay. And he had no money. He had like $7 or something, So, worth of rupees, which couldn't exchange. So basically he had nothing. So Prabhupada got as he explains in much of his oftentimes when he's telling the story how he came, it was such, there's a P form, I don't know what that means. It's some permission to leave India, you know. So he had worked for that, I don't know, it took months, you know. Finally he got everything in order, he had his passport, you know, and everything. And he had this sponsorship. So he comes, and as he explained, first he landed in Boston, you know, and he took a little walk, you know, because as soon as they landed somewhere, he wanted to get off that boat, and his captain took him for a little walk, you know, in the city. And he became inspired to write that famous poem, Markandeya Bhagavad Dharma. It's in the songbook. Markandeya Bhagavad Dharma simply means Krishna consciousness in the West. Markandeya means the West. Bhagavad Dharma is Krishna consciousness. So, you know, in that, he has one of the verses, I don't know why you brought me to this terrible place, you know, because he saw everyone is in the modes of nature, you know, there's no sign of temples or anything, you know. But you have some reason, so please make my power of speaking suitable so that they'll understand and that they'll accept it, you know. He's praying like that. So that was a stop, and then they came down to New York. So now in New York, you have what you call as traveler's aid. The people at the other end of your trip, someone's coming to America, they don't know what to do, and so they'll say, okay, look for the, you know, they had to describe Prabhupada, you know, he's unique, you know, short, and he's wearing these robes, and, you know, you couldn't miss him. And so, I forgot his name now, but he you know, paid something, and they had the traveler's aid. They put Prabhupada on the proper bus to go to the destination. That's basically what he did. So Prabhupada describes, you know, in his diary, I think it is. I didn't know whether to go left or right. I had nowhere to go. But then he didn't call it traveler's aid, but someone had been sent to meet me, and so they took, you know, Prabhupada on the bus, and he was on the bus, and he describes going through, you know, I think he saw the industry of New Jersey to get into Pennsylvania, because I used to go there all the time, and once a month. When I was working on BTG, I lived in the New York Temple, and we had a whole crew, and Satsrup Maharaj was the editor-in-chief of the magazine, although he was mostly busy writing the Lilamrita, the 6-volume, it was 6 volumes, huge, you know. Anyway, so you go through there's all of these refineries, you know, it's Ugra Karma, you know, and probably the bus would go through there, then you get into Pennsylvania, and it becomes very rural and kind of a pleasant drive, you know. But it's long, Western Pennsylvania is a big state, you know. So Prabhupada was doing that, and you know, he was at the highest stage of yoga, you know, the bhakti yoga, the advantage. And it's interesting because in this chapter, in text 20 and 21, Krishna will describe the state of samadhi, and you know, it was very enthralling to read that for the first time. One experiences the greatest happiness through transcendental senses. You know, and in the purport, Prabhupada will explain how this is similar to what the bhakti yogi experiences. But you don't have to go through the whole thing of going off to the mountains or some other secluded place and wrestling with the mind and practicing the pranayama. It's just not possible in this age. Hare Krishna, welcome. We saved the whole side of the temple for you. We're on page 258. In the book, Hare Krishna. So anyway, this verse describes, and the purport, that a real sannyasi is a yogi. In other words, sannyas means complete renunciation, and one of the prerequisites for practicing yoga is this high level of renunciation. You really, you know, you have to give up, live alone, you know, and practically, you know, beg, you know, or dig up some herbs or roots and fruits, you know, from the forest. It's extremely austere. So, but Prabhupada is equating the, you know, if someone is a serious yogi, then he's automatically a sannyasi, because that has to be the high level of renunciation. Sannyas means complete, you know, separation from any kind of sense gratification. Very austere. So Prabhupada makes a point in his purport, as he will in others, that all the purposes are perfectly served by practice of Krishna consciousness. And the main difference is it's practical for us. But the goal still has to be the same. The goal is reinstatement. Is this Bhushan, I can tell. He's come. Hare Krishna Bhushan, welcome. We're on page 259. And so the whole idea of the movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that he came to give us a practice that is practical for those of us of this age. We don't live very long. Right near the beginning of the Bhagavatam, I think the first chapter, there's a description, a little summary of the disqualifications of the Kali Yugites for spiritual life, in general. In other words, why we need as much help as possible. So he said, Prayan alpayashak sabya kalavasmin yugejana manda sumanda matayo manda bhagya upadruta. So prayana means for the most part, and they describe all of these means. For the most part, you don't live that long. If we live 90, 100, oh my God, but that's nothing compared to what they used to live in previous ages. Just in the previous age of Dwapara Yuga, 1,000 years was maximum. Now practically 100, is pushing it. Then before that, Treta Yuga, 10,000 years. Who can even imagine? And before that, 100,000 years. Valmiki lived at that time. He meditated on Ram, chanting Ram, 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 for 60,000 years. And then he was realized, and then he wrote the Ramayana. It all became revealed to him. So what are we going to do? We can hardly meditate for 15 minutes. So we need a system that's practical, and that's this Bhakti Yoga as given to us by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the principles are here also, and the same idea. This Dhyāna-yoga chapter, at the end of it, there are important instructions in here. But ultimately, Arjuna will reject it as impossible for him. The famous verse, Chanchalam hi man, because it's all like wrestling with the mind. The whole thing is the mind. You focus that mind on the Supreme and attain samadhi in that way, but you have to become, very austere. So he say, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramati balabhadradham tasyaham nigraham manye vayo ivasu duskaram. He says this mind is very flickering, just like very, very flickering. Chantala means going here and there, and very stubborn, very powerful. It does what it wants to do. I made a little joke many years ago. You don't have to laugh. Mind has a mind of its own. You're trying to... Anyway, the point is it's very, very stubborn, unless you have the holy name, which if you chant and you try to concentrate, is so attractive. And this is the point Krishna makes in the next chapter. He said, okay, Arjun, I gave you all of these instructions outlining briefly the system of Ashtanga Yoga. But I see that it's not suitable for you and so forth. So here's how, now I'm going to tell you how you can naturally fix your mind on me. How it's feasible. Maya sakta mana. Asakta, the whole thing is attraction. Rather than just grit your teeth and try to remember Om, or try to remember some yantra or something, fix your mind on a spot on the wall. It's artificial. But to fix your mind on Krishna, he's all attractive. That's what it means. If you just think of him, if you just chant, you find that it becomes very pleasant after some time. Look at these wonderful paintings. It's not great any austerity to come and just look at this painting and meditate on Krishna. He's all attractive. So if you learn how to systematically think of Krishna, you'll find that it's easier to do that, much easier. So let's go on and see how it develops. So he's going to describe it now in a few verses in the system, starting with text 3 on page 259. Aruduksho mane yogam karma karana muchyate yogarudasya tasyaiva shamakarana muchyate. For one who is a neophyte in the Eightfold Yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who is already elevated in yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. Purport: the process of linking oneself with the Supreme is called yoga. It may be compared to a ladder for attaining the topmost spiritual realization. This ladder begins from the lowest material condition of the living entity and rises up to perfect self-realization in pure spiritual life. According to various elevations, different parts of the ladder are known as by different names. But all in all, the complete ladder is called yoga and may be divided into 3 parts. namely Jnana-yoga, Dhyāna-yoga, and Bhakti-yoga. The beginning of the latter is called the Yoga Rurukshu stage, and the highest rung is called the Yoga Rudha stage. Concerning the Eightfold Yoga system, attempts in the beginning to enter into meditation through regulative principles of life and practice of different sitting postures, which are more or less bodily exercises, are considered fruitive material activities. All such activities lead to achieving perfect mental equilibrium to control the senses. When one is accomplished in the practice of meditation, he ceases all disturbing mental activities. A Krishna-conscious person, however, is situated from the beginning on the platform of meditation because he always thinks of Krishna. And being constantly engaged in the service of Krishna, he is considered to have ceased all material activities. So you can see right away there's an advantage in bhakti. Right away you have this Maha Mantra, right, which is free, we're not charging. Oh, by the way, you know, the Maha Mantra costs $100 now. That's why we have a little curtain over the thing now. No, never. It's always giving out mantra cards, you know, the mantra sign, you know. And Prabhupada would tell how in Bengal, you know, if someone goes door to door with some ripe mangoes, giving them away, someone will be suspicious. What is he giving them away for? What's wrong with them, you know? So that's the thing. It costs $1,000 for the mantra. That must be a better mantra, so let me go get it. But this is the Maha Mantra. It's free. That's the whole idea. Lord Chaitanya, he's coming and he's giving freely the most valuable thing, which is love of God. And when Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami first met Lord Chaitanya in Ramkeli, when he came there, specifically he knew they were there. And they were, you know, qualified Brahmins, they were devotees, but they'd been dragooned more or less to work in the government, the Muslim government. One was the prime minister, and one was the finance minister, right and left hand of the king, of the Lawab. So he didn't want to lose them. In fact, when Sanatana Goswami pretended to be sick and stayed at home, he was actually studying the Bhagavatam with many sages, you know. Rupa Goswami didn't have trouble leaving. He cashed out, and what did he have left? A whole boatload of gold. That's worth billions today, you know. But he didn't care. He was already in the sannyas mood. He gave half of it for the care of the Brahmins and the Vaishnavas. A quarter of it he gave to his family, because they expect something. They call it trouble if you don't give it. And the quarter of it he kept with and get this now, a pious grocer for an emergency. Are there any grocers now you trust with a couple of $100 million? No. Anyway, but this was a different time. And that money came in handy because Sanatana Goswami was able to bribe the jailer to let him go, and so he was able to escape from prison and go off to see Lord Chaitanya in Benares, where for 30 days he received personal instruction. And that's reflected in the chapter 20 to 24, I think, in the Madhya Lila. It's very wonderful. So anyway, but when they first met Lord Chaitanya, Rupa Goswami, I think he composed the verse on the spot. Famous verse, Namo Mahavadanyaya, Krishna Prema Padayate, Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Trije Namaha. I offer my humble obeisances unto the supremely munificent Lord. Now just for this group, there is a difference between the word munificent and magnanimous. Prabhupada would also often use them interchangeably. Magnanimous means one who is very noble of heart and forgiving. Munificent specifically refers to charity, giving. One is giving, the other is forgiving. But be that as it may, but what he said, Mahavadanyaya. Dana means a gift. Vadanya means generous. You know. So he's Mahavadanya. He's the most generous, most munificent of all avatars. And he's Krishna himself, Krishnaya. And he's come in the name of Krishna Chaitanya. Namo Mahavadanya, Krishna Prema Padayate. He's giving the greatest gift, love of Krishna. Krishna Prema Padayate. Krishnaya, unto Krishna. Krishnaya, Krishna Chaitanya Namane. Named, with the same word, Namane, named. Krishna Chaitanya. Krishna Chaitanya Namne, Namo Maha, Krishna Premati Krishnaya, Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tuje Namaha. But he's come with a golden complexion, not the blackish complexion of Krishna. So that verse is key to understanding Lord Chaitanya. And having full faith in him, they gave everything up. You can imagine the position, the wealth, the aristocracy. This wonderful verse in the Goswami song, I think it's number 4. Prabhupada would sing this. Tyaktva turna mashesha mandalapati shrening sadat tuchavat bhutva dina ganeshiko karunaya kopina kantashrito gopi bhavara samritabdala hari kallola magno muhur vande rupa sanatano raghuya goshi jiva gova. I offer my basis unto the 6 Goswamis, namely Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, and Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Now he describes them in this one, but really it's 3 of them that did it, that really fit this verse. Tyaktva turnam, without hesitating, without thinking, should I or shouldn't I? You know, I've got a pretty good deal here, but you know, no. Immediately, as soon as they were inspired by Lord Chaitanya, Tyaktva turnam, they gave up ashesha mandadapati, endless money and endless influence, as especially Rupa and Sanatan in the government, and Raghunath, who was the only heir to a huge fortune. His father and uncle, his father was known as Hiranya Majumdar. Hiranya means gold. I guess it was probably his nickname. But it means, you know, that they were unlimitedly wealthy. He was the only heir. He was going to be set up for life, you know. And beautiful wife and everything, you know. And he had to escape. He ran away. And they kept, you know, they had... father hired guards to go after him, bring him back, and all this stuff. And finally, he got all the way to Puri, and he was with Lord Chaitanya. But he was the emblem of renunciation. You know, he gave it up immediately. A tuchavat, insignificant. Welcome, Prabhu. Nice to see you again. All the wealth and the influence and everything, they saw it as very, very insignificant compared to pure love for Krishna, which Lord Chaitanya was giving them. And making them, you know, assigning them to be leaders and write books and excavate the pastime places in Vrindavan, you know. So, Bhutva Dina Ganeshiko for the Dina Gana. Dina Gana means the people who are most wretched, those who are without Krishna consciousness, for our sake, for the sake of the ignorant masses who were suffering. They took on the most simple clothes, you know, rejected clothes. They wandered around Vrindavan. They didn't even have their own tree to live under. They lived under a different tree every night, you know. From being the right hand, you know, in the palace, you know, all the way down to that. Did they miss it? Oh, I wish no. They didn't, you know, it was gone. Because, how's it go? Out of mercy, Karunaya Kopina Kundashito, rejected clothes. And what were they experiencing? Gopi Bhavara Samrata Lahari Kallola Magnomohor. Again and again they were diving and drinking the nectar of the highest, most intense relationship of Krishna's servants, the relation of the gopis to Krishna. And they wrote that in their books, and they you know, were able to attract people to give, wealthy people to build temples, you know, and it's all by, but they themselves were completely renounced. So that's the perfection of sannyas, and it's perfection of yoga. But they didn't bother with the asanas and the pranayama and all of that. It's just chanting and hearing and writing and glorifying and just what we're doing. And Rupa Goswami codified it in the Nectar of Devotion. And that his principles and everything is the template for this movement. So, the ladder, so he's talking about the ladder, because of material condition living entity rises up perfect self-realization, pure spiritual life. Different parts of the ladder known by different names. All in all, a complete ladder is called yoga, may be divided into 3 parts: Jnana-yoga, Dhyāna-yoga, and Bhakti-yoga. So he's already talked about Jnana-yoga, and now he's talking about Dhyāna-yoga. Dhyāna-yoga being this meditative yoga. But then the highest level is Bhakti-yoga. Yoga-rudha is the highest rung. And he's talking about concerning the Eightfold Yoga system, attempts in the beginning to enter into meditation through regulative principles of life and practice different sitting postures, more or less are considered fruit of material activities. And indeed, Prabhupada witnessed how that system Because this, you know, when people talk about yoga, which when I was coming up in like 70, it had just started. The wave had come, you know, in the 60s. There was a fascination with the East, with India, you know, with the Beatles and everything. And part of that was this entry of these yoga studios. You'd see them, but where I was on the Long Island, there wasn't. I had to go into the city, and I met. I joined this yoga studio, which was led by the devotee who's later become Amala Bhakta, who's now Amala Bhakta Maharaj, and who made very wonderful recordings. He's still there. He was always, you know, a generation older than me. He's in his 90s now, but he did yoga, you know, so he's still holding it together. But eventually it wasn't satisfying. You know, I went to another yoga studio, and fortunately I came in touch with a friend who suggested, why don't we go to it was Sunday, why don't we go to the Hare Krishna temple? All right, I had a car, you know, so we drove down there, and that was my first visit. It was too much for me, because I was used to meditating, you know. All of the loud, you know, sounds and the banging, and what are those figures on the altar, you know, and I couldn't. And then there's these guys in orange with these big plates, you know, carrying, what is this, you know? Because I was eating just raw food, you know, so I could hardly eat anything. But I tried a little halva, that was in. I became an addict as soon as I ate my first plate of halva. And I would take home big half-gallon things. If it was supposed to last a week, it lasted about 3 days. Anyway, that's a long story. But I was saved, you know, by coming in touch with the devotees and taking the mantra. I would, instead of meditating on Om, which I found impossible to do, I said, why don't I meditate on Hare Krishna? And so I would, you know, and well, when I went ready to go to work, you know, I was floating. And I would try to chant it and try to cure my patients. You know, I was given the oxygen. I tried to give the mantra, you know, in my mind. You know. Anyway, I won't tell you how it worked for my father. Well, I might as well tell you. It's just us and our wonderful guests. So, you know, I was still very much a hatha yogi. You know, wondering about how, you know, the benefits, physical benefits of yoga. So I was mixing them up a little bit. So my father had a stroke. He was only 62. I was not in the movement yet, but I was chanting, and I was working in the hospital. So the doctors were very pessimistic. They didn't think he was going to survive. You know, my mother was distraught. You know, so he was in the hospital very close to where I was living, not the one I was working, which was like a 20-minute drive away. So I went over there, and I saw him. He was lying in the bed. And the nurse wasn't there, and so I said, all right, let me try it. You know, so I put my hand on his forehead, and I held it there, and I was chanting in my mind, trying to project, you know, I didn't know what I was doing, to try to project through my arm, you know, and see if it could heal him, you know. So he didn't jump off the bed or anything, you know. But so nothing apparently happened. After some time, the nurse came in, and I left, you know. But the doctors had predicted he wasn't going to come out. He came out of that stroke, and he wasn't completely cured. You know, there's just like our friend Sureshwar, you know, he has one arm functional. But he could talk fine, and he had to have a cane, you know, to walk and this and that, but he was functional. He lived to 80, from 62 to 80. He had a whole other career. He met the governor of New York State. And he was advocating for seniors to get more help from the state, you know, monetary. So I'm not saying you know, I've tried it with some devotees, and it worked. I'll tell you those stories another time. But the main thing that you know, the mantra cures is the disease of birth and death. So there's no more disease at all, and that actually works. So. What does the Bible say? Yeah. The fruit of material activities. And you can see that oftentimes, you know, the yoga system was exploited in the West for how to get, you know, better health and all these things. You know, that's the and if you're really expert, you know, you can learn about these siddhis that you can develop. You know, read minds and all. You know, that's all fruitive stuff. That's all. You know, you try to make money out of that. So it's a corruption, and that's the problem with some of these other things. Because unless you are trained from the beginning that the perfection of the process you're undergoing is dependent on your giving up your self-centered attitude. That is, the whole idea is to understand we're part and parcel of Krishna, and that we can really be happy when we act like a hand. You know, the hand doesn't act independently. Prabhupada would always tell these stories. Udarendriyanam, I think, I forget what that means, but the senses once went on strike. That's the thing. Can you turn the heat off? Because they were jealous of the stomach. The hands are doing so much work, and the feet are going somewhere just so they can get some money and buy food to put in the stomach. So the stomach is enjoying all their work. So they felt like, you know, they weren't getting a good deal, so they went on strike. So so no money was coming in, and no food was being bought, and he wasn't eating. But what happens then? Then the senses become weak. The very senses, which you think, you know, because that's how it works. You have to put food in the stomach and then digest it, and then get it. So the senses realized that it was a bad deal. We may go on strike, but we're hurting ourselves. You see? So that's analogous to us. We went on strike. We didn't want to serve Krishna. So Krishna says, okay, here's this whole material world. Go for it. See what you can do. You know, giving us minute independence. But it's not our natural position, because we've disconnected ourselves from Krishna. I mean, we can't ultimately be disconnected, but our consciousness is such. We try to live independently. But what happens? You know, you may succeed, you know, as a human being, say, because you know there's millions of different forms you can take. But the first one is a human being, or even higher demigod. You know, Brahma was created. But if you try to forget me, then you're still good. Eventually the body is going to wear out, and you'll suffer death, and then you'll take rebirth again. And if you're in the modes of nature, if you're sinful, then you may lose that human form, and it's just suffering one after another. Dukkhalayam shashvatam. Krishna certifies it in the 8th chapter, that this world is dukkha, means the abode of misery. And even if you get a little, you know, somehow or other get a little happy situation, it's a shashvatam, it's temporary, it'll degrade and it'll eventually be miserable. That's the nature of this world. And so is there an alternative? Yes. You have to come back to me, you see? And take our happiness, our pleasure, in the pleasure of Krishna. That's what it comes down to. There's this wonderful little phrase from the Sandarbhas that Prabhupada quotes in the purport in the 2nd canto, 2, 3, 10, I think it is. Bhajaniya padama purusha sukha matva swasukatvam, which simply put means this. Bhajaniya means the worshipable, padama purusha is the Supreme Person, the worshipable Supreme Person, Krishna. Sukha matra, only his happiness. Swasukatvam, your own happiness. Only take your own happiness in the happiness of the Supreme Person. Now immediately, you know, in our conditioned state, well, yeah, what about me? I mean, I'm just going to become a slave and I'm not going to enjoy it. But the difference is, because on the material side, that happens all the time. You get a boss who doesn't pay you enough, or you literally become a slave or whatever. But Krishna, as we learned at the end of the last chapter, you remember the end of the last chapter, the very important verse, which is the peace formula. How to be peaceful? Bhoktaram yagitapasang sarva loka maheshwaram. Sudidam sarva bhutanam gyatva shantim richiti. How can one be really peaceful? And peacefulness is actually the prerequisite for any kind of happiness, because that's there in the 2nd chapter. You can understand. So he says, one who understands that I am the actual enjoyer of all sacrifices and all austerities, Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. I am the great controller of all planets and everything that's going on in them. You know? Well, that person is very awe-inspiring and powerful. I hope he takes some mercy on me. I'm just an individual. No, because the next line says, Suridam Sarvabhutanam. I am the ever well-wishing friend of every living entity. He's living with us in our heart. And he only wants the best for us because we're his children. It ultimately comes down to love. Krishna loves us, but we've forgotten him. This is it. And he wants us back, so he comes to reinstall Dharma. You know, he said in the 4th chapter, why should he care? Why didn't he just leave us here? Because we're the prodigal children left. So Suridam, the word Surya is very important. Ever well-wisher. Prabhupada signed his letters, all his letters, your ever well-wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. He would never say, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. He would always just say, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, you see. But that, your ever well-wisher, means that he is representing the Super Soul on planet Earth. He came here just for us. If he was just out for his own spiritual life, just stay in Radha Damodar and chant Hare Krishna, bathe in the Yamuna every morning. Why come here? Because he's full of compassion. Some sadhadava that we sing every morning, those who come to Mangalarti, is an ocean of mercy, or a cloud of mercy showering down and extinguishing the blazing fire of material life. But to get in position, he had to come all the way to the west, to the Western world, and undergo so many hardships and austerities. That is the Kunasanana, what is it? The real sign of a very highly realized soul, is that although enjoying the relation with Krishna at every moment, he's feeling sad because of the people in misery who don't know Krishna. As I emphasized, I think I meant last class, was Prahlad Maharaj. He personified that in his prayers to Nrsingadev. He says, Naibod Vijay Padadaratya Vaitaranyas, Fadviya Gayana Mahamrita Magnachitta. My dear Lord, he's speaking this directly to Nrsingadev. You can imagine, a little tiny boy, 5 years old, but he's in his Komala mood, very, very gentle. He's not, once Prahlad comes, So what does he say? He says, I'm not at all disturbed, because I'm always with you. And my consciousness is always with you and your Krishna. Vaitarani river, the river between the material and the spiritual world. I'm always on the other side, even though I may look like I'm on this side, but I'm with you on that side. And therefore, at any moment, I can chant your glories and dive into an ocean of bliss. I don't have any problems. And he showed it. Even his father tried to torture him and kill him, and he was completely peaceful. But, he says, and here's the amazing part, Shochetato, I am lamenting. Why are you lamenting? You're Prahlad, Vimukha chetasa indriyata maya sukaya badamudvito vimudhan, because these fools and rascals who have rebelled against you in their material life, vimukha chetasa, they've turned their consciousness away from you. Vimukha means turning your face away, and getting absorbed in maya. So that's what these foolish materialists are. Indriyartha, for the sake of the indriyas, for the sake of sense gratification. Indriya means senses. Maya sukhaya, enjoying the illusory happiness of the material world, and bearing the great burden of trying to enjoy that. We see so many, I take a walk and there's a certain homeless people I see all the time. Oh, it's so sad, some of them are so dark, they're covering over, they have their little, carts they're pushing, They're the ostensible losers, but we're also, the ordinary sense gratifiers are also the losers, and they're headed for that. But that's the material world, it's a place of misery, dukkha. So, vimukha indriya maya sukhaya bodham, they're bearing this great burden of trying to enjoy the senses, and they're suffering so much. Udvihito vimudhan, they're foolish. And I understand that, the next verse says, only you can save them, and I am now dedicated to giving them you. In other words, he's the preacher. That's the perfect mood of the preacher. The preacher in Krishna consciousness, the realized soul, is blissful in his own Krishna consciousness. But he's sad, empathetic, to see the suffering of the people in general, so he wants to try to save as many as possible. And that was Prabhupada's mood. And that's why this movement spread all over the world. And the more that we can reflect that mood ourselves, the more we will attract people who are looking for some shelter and some real happiness and bliss. So real happiness comes not from the sense gratification. How many times? I should probably make a T-shirt of this verse, because it's in the last chapter. Yehi sangsbhajaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate ajandamantan konteya nateshu ramadevuda. Intelligent people, enlightened people, do not take part in the pleasures that are due to the contact of the senses with their sense objects. In other words, sense gratification. O son of Kunti, welcome. Such pleasures are the sources of all misery, and they have a beginning and an end. And so the wise do not take part in them. They're temporary and they bring misery. How do they bring misery? Because they bring you another birth. if nothing else. Otherwise, the tendency is to go overboard, eat too much, take drugs, or whatever, and then you suffer in this lifetime, what to speak of next life. And most tragically, it keeps you in illusion, and therefore you can't be conscious of Krishna. If you're engaged in gross sense gratification, and you're dedicated to it. There has to be that self-restraint in the beginning. Yeah, you can sit on this side, Guru. Yeah. See if we can get another. Yeah, those benches are nice. Yeah, they're made for you. Just give them a book. We're on page 260 now. Unfortunately, we're also almost ready to end the class. So, what we're going to get in this chapter is Krishna's outline of the yoga system, which is a bona fide system, the Ashtanga yoga, but it's not practical for us in this age. Certainly not for any on the mat. There's some who can practice. There's very, very few. But it's not for the masses. It's not for us. We can practice Hatha yoga and get limber, and but we're not going to go back to guided that way. But if we can become advanced in Krishna consciousness if we really put our minds to it. It's a practical means. Certainly, anyone can chant Hare Krishna. Is it so hard? Of course, you have to be open to it. If you just stand in the back, I don't know. The old mudra thing. Abhaidan. Okay, any questions, comments on any of these points? Unfortunately, the class is almost over now, but we'll have a nice kirtan.
I have a question.
Okay.
So, how is Jnana Yoga different from Dhyāna-yoga?
How is Jnana-yoga different from Dhyāna-yoga?
And how is it different from Bhakti Yoga?
Okay. The Jnana-yoga is basically, that is very prominent amongst the Mayavadis, the impersonalists. The whole thing is, in Mayavad, I understand the discipline is read the Vedanta Sutra with the Sharirika Bhashya. That's the whole thing. To read it, talk about it, and meditate and understand that you're none different from Brahman. I'm Aham Brahmasmi, and everything that entails, and that so the whole thing is through knowledge we are going to stop the senses from getting bewildered by the sense objects, and we'll through austerity, which comes through that also. We'll transcend and we'll go up into Brahman, Unfortunately, you can't stay there because it's not natural for us to just be white light, I compare it to, I've never been in one, but I know they exist, the sensory deprivation chambers, where it's with perfect temperature, right? And I don't know if I do something with the water so you can float in it, right? Salt, a lot of salt, yeah. So what a relief. I don't know if I guess probably a lot of people fall asleep in there. Well, that's dangerous, you can drown. But then at a certain point, what time is it? I got to get back to my kids. I got to go to work. You can't stay there. It's not natural. We ourselves, just like we are in our regular life, we have senses, we have things we got to do. We're active, we have relationships, right? Rasa. It may be a pale reflection, but that's what makes life worth living. Family life, you have all these relationships. Okay, I've got to go to work, But ultimately, that's illusory because it's temporary. It's so important to separate the sat from the asat. We are after the sat. We ourselves are sat. We're eternal. We never die. We're never born and we never die. The body is born and the body dies. But we ourselves never, Najayate mriyate bhakadartam, right? Krishna says, 2nd chapter, 20th verse. So what does that mean? It means that we're eternal beings trapped in a temporary body. If we identify with them, then we'll be very disappointed because we're not eternal. And the body eventually, so much misery, disease, so many things happen. Political things happen, to make you depressed. So we want to reawaken our awareness of our spiritual identity and everything it entails. We have spiritual activities, we have spiritual thoughts, we have spiritual, you see. And so there's a whole life built around that. And then to leave this body for the last time, no more. We don't have to take another material body because we're not attached. We don't have any material desires to fulfill. All our desires are geared on pleasing Krishna, which again means that you're really pleased. Otherwise, you're pleasing your senses, but ultimately that's a trap. Because according to this verse that I just read, that produces misery in this life and the next. So the art of bhakti is learning how to relish spiritual pleasure by various services to Krishna, beginning with chanting and hearing his name, which is available to everybody. Okay, it's 8:10, so we have time just for 2 minutes for a little poem. Okay? All right, I think we'll have time. You just have to listen carefully. Where Krishna lives, felicity abounds with pure simplicity and loving sensibility, all serve him with humility. See? The material body. Now it's too hot. But when a living entity rejects his true identity and attitudes stupidity, surrenders to cupidity, he loses all sagacity and with it all capacity to understand reality or curb his sensuality. Abandoning humility, he touts his own ability, forgetting his fragility and fortune's volatility. Immersed in asininity for what seems an infinity of lives devoid of piety, he suffers in anxiety till contact with God's devotee, perhaps of utmost brevity, awakens his affinity for words of the divinity. Perceiving the futility of all his imbecility, the soul regains his sanity and casts away his vanity. Endowed with new humility, he serves with all ability and growing spontaneity his guru and the deity. Regaining his identity, the wayward living entity returns to the fraternity of Krishna for eternity. The fall and redemption of the soul. So, all glory to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari. I'm sorry? Asininity means stupidity.